Sorry I'm a little late. I told Sarah originally we might be 10:30. We tried to rush, but I know you have a time, so I'm sorry we ended up being a little bit late. I just want to start.
Are we first?
Tim, you need to hit the.
Pretty good. So welcome to the party. No problem at all. No aren't late. Good. I'll just do a recap of where we are, and we'll just kind of sort through what we need to accomplish. Here's our timeline, showing where we are on session 10. No, that's fine. No, you're fine. And we're scheduled out through 16 and 12. To be determined after that. We have a full week reserved in that following week. That would be starting on what day?
It's that same one,
The 12th?
the 13th, 14th.
Okay,
I think next week we'll only meet once, right, on the 28th?
I believe that's what I remember.
Yeah, and then the next week we'll fill in for, okay.
So that shows us where we are. Generally in good shape. Here's the TA articles to date. I have 2 more here, which I believe are ready to go. 28, 11 and 28, I have them in order. So I've signed those. I think they're good. I think everybody's on the same page. I'll hold those.
Thank you.
You can sign the copies that were in there. Check and make sure I signed all 4 copies, because I may not have. I think I signed them.
And so we do the TAs, are we leaving the strike language and all that stuff, or should we return it to?
I think we should all have the strike language.
Okay, I didn't realize that, that's fine.
I think that way everybody knows what we've approved in terms of changes without having to go back and consult the prior version.
You missed this one, so,
This, so I got 3 out of 4. Right?
yeah, that's not bad. It's probably acceptable.
Well, it probably wouldn't be at the top of the promotional list.
I've been okay with it, thank you.
This is a list of the proposals that we've received from y'all. Most of these are detailed, but they are all on the table for discussion. Wages and wellness are just conceptual at this point in time, and of course, 2 is not in here because we've agreed to do it last, which makes perfect sense. Here's our proposals and responses by our side. So we believe everything that's not been TA'd is queued up and on the table. We have investigations and disciplinary actions, which I am ready to discuss with you. I have it here. On association dues, I think everything is agreed. We're just running down the final loose ends in terms of information from payroll. Drug testing, we understand y'all have some further feedback on that you're working on that. Haven't looked at the blood test dynamics from the prior proposal. Don't know if you'll have that today, but
We'll probably pull in the blood test stuff tomorrow, but I gotta go through my team on that. You know, we made some determinations that when we reviewed them with DMS, seemed like we kind of went the wrong way in a couple areas. So I think we're going back to closer what I think y'all, it came close to with DMS. I'm not saying you have TA on it, but
mighty good.
you know, what are you getting close to?
Appreciate that feedback. Those are the ones I just mentioned a minute ago, and as I referred to, definitions will be at the end. I would just mention on the definitions piece that, you know, if in the course of y'all's review of articles and discussion and so forth, you kind of flag any of those definitions, you know, give us a heads up. We'll try to do the same so that we kind of know where that's going before we get to the last few minutes.
Right now, I think we'd like to see if we can come to terms with the definition of reasonable suspicion, a little bit more than just having a policy, but besides that, that's on what comes to mind.
All right, thank you for that. We'll visit about that on our side, see if there's anything we need to tell you. Here's the ones that are currently, you know, actively being discussed. We understand that y'all are gonna have probably some package proposals or bundles on how some of these things fit together. And I think that's the end of this overview.
Okay. Yeah, we have eight articles to propose today in kind of the context of those bundles. Let's go through our kind of daily thing real quick like you all did.
Do I need to unplug this or do you just do a switch?
Oh, thank you.
I need one of those magic switches.
Don't we all?
So these are the things we TA'd. I bet we have the same set. Other than I have these as kind of a separate slide now because we're about ready to TA those, just acknowledge that. The dues is kind of on both sides. So it looks like you're proposing something today, which is we'll look forward to. The asterisks are things we're going to be proposing today. So we have something, another, I think civil service is actually on your side of the table, but we have we wanted to kind of include it in the bundle so we'll figure that out. I don't think that stops our progress. Entire agreement, it's a standard. I wouldn't be surprised if we have drug testing to you later today. We just need to talk to my team.
So I would just say, if you're keeping track of things through your PowerPoints in any way, shape, or form, you inadvertently had 26 in your TA instead of 28.
That's right, earlier. It was 28 and 7, I think.
Oh, sure is.
Yeah, they're in that folder.
Just type away, not a big deal.
Yeah,
Just wanted
thank
to
you.
make
No,
sure
it's a
that you
big
didn't-
deal. I should have had that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Our side of the table is management rights. Again, the asterisk kind of shows things that we're proposing today as part of these bundles. Wellness, we're starting to work on. And we still have, we kind of agreed to hold this, this to the end. And these are kind of things we, we kind of started out in conflict. I think we're pulling dues off of there. Hopefully we're pulling some more off soon.
Okay.
Like I think on 13, that's where we're contemplating maternity leave, and I know you all are looking, that's probably part of the economic proposal perhaps, so we might have some movement on that. Maybe we don't, we'll see. That's it. So, can we just run into our proposals really quick?
Sure.
Okay. So we've got two different bundles, and the whole idea with this is there's 8 articles. I think we've done a really good job of working through the articles. They've been relatively non-substantive. I'm not saying there's no substance to them, but relatively non-substantive. And we need to make some progress. We're getting into the last throes of this thing. So I think, maybe I'm gonna miss some ball, who knows? But when you bundle these things, then you can talk about things that are important to us in one article, maybe something's important to you, and make some trades. And hopefully get to a deal. That's what we hope to do.
That kind of sounds familiar.
It sounds like something you said. So this is one of the bundles. We told you last week not to hide the ball, so you can be thinking about it. This is we're doing civil service, even though it's not quite like the others, but we think that we can get a deal on that too. With this one.
Let me capture that quick. So we've got 4. I'll just put it back.
And one of the things you'll see that we tried to do, which seemed to be a serious interest of the city, is remove the charter language. You'll see that in these proposals.
Okay.
I think you'll signal to the table plenty that is part of the environment currently. And so, and we never intended it to be the way I think y'all took it, but we can see why you think that after we had more discussion. So I just want to let you know we were earnest in what we were trying to do, but we're willing to meet you, we're willing to see on that.
And these are items you're gonna send us,
Pardon me?
you're gonna send us, are they revised or are they the ones you have before?
No, I'm gonna send you revised
That's what I thought.
proposals, yes, and, I'm prepared to go over them here, but I don't think we need to. I think we can just go to this
Okay.
PowerPoint and send them to you. And
We'll
there's
look
gonna-
at them, we'll figure out what we need to do.
There's gonna take some back and forth. This is gonna be something where we send them over to you guys. These are all great. I mean, it's just not the way it works, so we know that. So, we're basically, we looked at management rights carefully, and we debated each one and tried to look at different, interests we had and things that we thought, had a risk of maybe impeding some of our interests. But we're adding back 5 of the items in management rights that you all proposed earlier. And so here's one where the word decide was limited, and so the words were added. Layout and boss positions, we're adding that back in. Modify, eliminate, establish rules, regulations, govern safety. Determine work schedules, we left that the same, but establish, limit, modify the methods and processes that matter when we work, but to evaluate, supervise, we left. And, I think we probably look at this similarly. Maybe not, but let me just say and see if we do. So I think that collective bargaining contemplates I didn't notice you, how you doing? I think it kind of contemplates a continued duty of bargaining, but not if it's expressly put into management rights, And so when we debated those things, that's what we're kind of looking at. Are we willing to kind of reopen that little section of management rights and make a change? So that was the process we went through. You may have other reasons why other concessions may be acceptable, but that, just to let you know, that's kind of the process we went through. Is that similar to the way you look at it too, Lowell, or do you have a different way of looking at it?
I think like I told you before, we're looking for an agreement that captures what we both intended. And that's what we're trying to do. And I believe I explained on this one that we are wanting to make sure that everybody understands that we think that's the normal meaning of the words that have been there before. And so I think you saw this. I don't blame you for seeing this as, is this moving the line in the management rights article? That's a very logical reason for the association to say, is this a change? We have felt like all along that that was capturing what that means. And so make includes both creating or getting rid of or modifying. That's what we think it means. And that's what we think it always meant. And we just wanted to make sure going forward that everybody was on the same page. So I think I heard what you said, and I think that that's not much different than what you said. I do appreciate the fact that you went back and listened to our comments about that, our explanation, and said, yeah, we can live with these additions to make that clear. Whether or not, we don't have to agree on whether that's what it used to mean or whether that it's changed.
Right.
As long as we now understand that's what it means, then we're on the same page. We're going forward with the contract that we don't know what it means.
That sounds great, and I hope you realize we are trying to get a deal. We are trying to listen to what y'all say and make concessions where we can. We truly are in earnest. I hope you all believe that. And we're willing to continue that process, and I know you all are too, so.
Do our best.
So these are some of the other ones, affecting the selection of firefighters, work performance measures and standards. And we can certainly see why y'all want 30 on these items.
So can we go just back one slide? I want to be clear. Are you saying that you don't believe we currently have the right to establish, eliminate, or modify schedules? Is that what you're stating by not
I don't
changing
want to
that one?
signal in any way that you have more rights than what you have now. That's some of the reason why we're concerned with some of the wording, you know? And, for instance, let's say there's a section, leave a section unnamed, that doesn't have a strong past practice in the schedule, but they have a schedule they enjoy. And management wanted to change it. We would certainly want to try to negotiate that. I think management would certainly point at this and say, maybe we don't need to, and then the arbitrator needs to make that decision in the end of whether, what we do. Adding words to that would, gives us a little bit of pause, gives a little bit of angst. For the exact reason I'm saying, that would be in something we would hope to convince the arbitrator or something that we should negotiate. Whether it makes sense or not, that's our rationale.
I know, we understand what you're saying.
And I think it's natural that there are certain items that management would rather have total control, but we would like to have more say. That's what this is about, is trying to call through that, right? And so the civil service article, I sent it over to you all, I think, last session, and I added back a sentence that we didn't catch that was removed. I'm not blaming anybody, I'll blame us. We didn't catch it, but it is a sentence we wanted in there. And so I think we accepted the strike on the last part of this, one of the sentences that we proposed that y'all made, and then we're adding back that other sentence for discussion. I think Becky talked about the complexity of track changes. I've run into the same thing. So it was removed and we didn't catch it, so it's just I think it's probably enough we can add it back. Okay with that. The entire agreement, we struck a pretty good part of the paragraph, and we added it back after talking to y'all, and we put, I think the section on your side of the table, about kind of throw it into the bundle. This is a sentence we were hoping to retain as part of the concession from.
So we had asked you a question on that one specifically, and I think you were going to check with Matt, and the question was, are you talking about impact bargaining there? Is that what the intent of that is? And you were going to check with Matt and see.
Yeah, I don't know.
We can't respond to you with this kind of.
I talked to Matt about that, but and I am is not familiar with the term impact bargaining as you are, but Matt is. I just can't remember what he told me, so I'll find out and we can get that back to you.
Yeah, and just to try to contribute to the way we sort that out. This is about what is the scope of the entire agreement clause. The zipper clause, which is common, I think almost ubiquitous in labor agreements, is that we made a deal, we've agreed on the term of the agreement, and what's in this agreement, you got what you asked for that we can agree to, you know, we got what we asked for that you can agree to, and then everybody can pretty much take that to the bank or count on it for the term.
Right. No,
The things that are actually in there, we can't change our mind and come back and say, well, we want to revisit this even though it's just the middle of year two. And I don't think that you're proposing to do that. The contract is really not a contract, and we can always change our mind or revisit
that's
things.
not what we're trying to do, no.
Impact bargaining, the way that she's using that term and the way that, and I think accurately and correctly so, even though we all know there's nothing in chapter 174 that uses that term.
Right.
There's nothing in 174 other than the generics that talk about the duty to good faith bargain. And there's very little case law in Texas on it. And so we also know that the few cases out there basically say, well, we'll look to the NLRB history and see what those rules would be and decide whether or not the Texas legislature intended for those to apply here. Who knows? I mean, there's an infinite number of things that we could have a dispute over. Your lawyers might have one opinion about what a Texas court would do with it. Ours might have a different opinion, but that's what we're trying to sort through.
Yeah, and so,
Impact bargaining just means if there's something explicit in the contract that gives us a right to do something, and we do what the contract allows us to do, and it has an impact on your membership that wasn't contemplated, wasn't thought about, does that open the window to bargaining over something during the 4-year term?
that's really not what we're trying to achieve. And that's some of the language we added back that I think gives you some clarity on that. What we're trying to achieve is, so there are some things that aren't contemplated, that are within the contract, even though they're uncontemplated. And that's why we added the language back. But there could be some things that are changes, that aren't past practice, that are changes, that aren't firmly defined within management rights, that are mandatory subject bargains that would affect our members. We would like the ability to make our case an arbitrator that needs to be negotiated.
And so I just wanted you to understand, and your team to understand as well. That's what our concern here is about this. We just want to know, to what extent does the contract stand during the term of the agreement? To what extent does either party have a responsibility to go back and revisit things that we have already?
No, we don't want to do that. But like, I mean, exactly what I said, and that's, when I read that, what I said is what I get out of it. I can see now how you might get a little more out of it than that. But that's not what we're trying to do. If management changes something that wasn't contemplated in the bargain, that is an mandatory subject bargain, that does affect our members in some substantive way, we'd like to make our case the arbitrator. We're not trying to re-adjudicate the whole agreement with that clause. That's what you're trying to get to.
All right.
Maintenance of standards, we accepted as a concession your proposed past practice language. Termination of agreement, we removed anything that references interest arbitration, but we still would like, I know you're coming back with the 3 questions we asked on this particular article still, but I went ahead and put the wording back from a previous edit, that the agreement remains in full force until either good faith negotiations are over or impasse procedures, whatever they are completed. We don't think it should be mutual, and that's all we're trying to get there, is that assurance that the bargain won't be changed during that period.
And that would include, I think the key question there is whether or not, if the impasse resolution procedure goes past the end of the evergreen clause, whether or not it continues. Is that what that's about?
I mean, Sarah might have a good reason for saying no, but I would say, I think so, yeah. I mean, all we're trying to do is make sure that while we're in either good faith negotiation after impasse or going to whatever dispute resolution procedure is is, valid or effective at the time.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
The
We'll talk
management's
about
not
that.
changing the bargain, we're not saying we're gonna take away some of the rights you bargained for during that period. That's really the main thing we're trying to get out of this. But why should I say no on that, Sharon?
Well, yeah, and maybe it's something I misunderstood from you, so before we discuss it.
Yeah.
So the conversation that you had with Devin initially on this was right now, the evergreen is not automatic. It's if we agree to, then we can do it up to 6 months. And he said that's fine, that if this happens, then we can agree to that. We have up to 6 months. If you wanna look at a longer time frame because you think that, with the current situation, or even if that goes away, if for some reason it might take longer than 6 months, we would be happy to extend that time frame. And you said no, that you had wanted it to be automatic without having to have us agree to it.
Well, we don't contemplate very long time frames. It sounds like that's what you're considering when you're saying no to some of these things. So that's good information. I hope we gave you some good information too. We're not considering this to be a very long time frame, like 6 months out or whatever. So maybe we can figure out a way to put a limit on it, but still make sure that management's committed to keeping the bargain in place until that we're complete.
So you want that to be automatically within the contract as opposed to how it's currently written, where we have to agree to it, you have to agree to it to be extended.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And if you're contemplating something different than we are, like some really extended time that we could do or whatever, we're not trying to get that. So if we can figure out that piece, that'd be fine.
All right, we'll talk.
Okay. Maybe you have a certain time limit, then you mutually agree after that. I don't think that's what's going to kill us. So the other bundle is hiring, promotions, and civilians. And we recommended hiring and promotions going forward with no changes. We've probably done the same thing with civilians. We just hadn't gotten to that yet. Because we thought they're mature articles, because we think there's lots of arm's length negotiations that went from the baseline laws to get to the point we were, and because they all added value, and I think all of us would have liked more in each one of those negotiations. I think that we would have liked, for instance, on promotion, our surveys are very clear that our members like less appointments, not more. And you guys want more appointments. We ended up where we ended up. We tried to respect that by basically saying, let's move these things forward without any changes. And that's kind of how we still feel about it, honestly. So I want to remind people, like on the hiring, there was some signaling from the management side that we are impeding progress, or we're not needed anymore. And the baseline is a really staunch, very strict hiring process, and we have to negotiate to change that. And we did a lot of negotiations to get where we are. And I started calling around to the cities, and Dallas has a city civil service, but they pretty much have a written test. Fort Worth, pretty much a written test. They do something what they call nines, where they divide it into nines. They have a oral process, but it's pretty much a written test.
Right.
Houston, same thing. San Antonio, I talked to the president. What's that?
Jim Tate.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting, but it only really affects the last 9, because what happens now, it doesn't really affect the ones before that. So it's pretty close. So we're really, out of the bigger cities in Texas, have given more allowance than the other city from the little bit of calling around I did over the weekend. We're way off of what this process is, and I think we're very close to a very optimal process, but we have to get there together, because these are the baseline laws we're working from, right? And so I just had them up there, you know what they are. I mean, even the fact that it's a written test has a minimum passing grade, we've taken away the passing grade on the cognitive to make it part of the compensatory model and a strong lean towards diversity. So anyway, we're removing any language from this that had city charter language. We knew you didn't like that sort of thing, and you understand why now. We are writing that we do not like the notion of the city unilaterally implementing internship programs for all the reasons we talked about before, but we are absolutely interested in doing an internship program. And I think you'll find either at the table or away from the table, we'll be very open to the idea. We just need to know what the idea is exactly. It would be more of a mutual agreement. The city returns the remainder of the COA languages to original language. We're open to specific proposals to increase the vendor pool. That sounds like there were some ideas on your side table for that. Where whoever delivers them, if you have specific ideas on selection procedures, you're open to that. And as we signaled a couple of times, we really are open to the notion of better test efficiency in terms of making it where we don't have this lag time between tests. I think we've discussed that in HPOC before. I think there's some good ideas on your side of the table on that. We're very open for that sort of thing. And that solves a lot of our problems. We can figure that one out because right now I think we've already exhausted tests. And this can be a long time until we can start a training academy again. And that's something I really hope we can look at and fix. And that'd be good for both sides actually. To reduce mandatory overtime and stuff like that, which we're trying to reduce. We still seek more information on this one. It's a provision you put in the training, and any applicant who cannot meet the minimum physical standards by day one of the academy may be released without an option to defer to a later class. If you're talking about not eliminating somebody but moving them, which I think that's what you're contemplating, but I want to make sure we're much more open to that idea. I've talked to our attorneys that deal with the consent decree stuff and the federal law, and they think as long as I'm eliminating on that basis, on that construct, but moving them to another class, that would be acceptable. I think our team would accept that too. But we need to have that clarity that we're not eliminating people, we're moving another class based on that particular physical construct. And that's it on hiring. Like I said, we'll send it over to you. We tried to hit the highlights. I hope we hit all the main highlights, but we'll send over the article. On promotions, you brought up the point, and it is an inconsistent position we've had for over 10 years, that you can be a shift commander by taking the test, but you need 2 years in rank to be the shift commander otherwise. So we're removing the provision unless, if management wants to keep it, because I think it's keeping more options. We're fine with leaving it. We're recommending for that consistency, which you guys brought up in that thought, saying that a competitive exam you could not be a shift commander just because you had a competitive exam. You still need 2 years experience. And we're also fine with other training programs for the shift commander, but our surveys are not even close on this one. I mean, members really feel strongly that they need that 2 years experience. Like I said before, 2 years is, for many people, is probably not enough. That's like a stretch to say 2 years is the minimum for us. So, deployment language, return to original language, and we struck the battalion chief promotion language. And what I don't have on here is the language for the pre-cert for the fire specialist exam. And whatever language we use, if it's our old language, which has worked for 12 years, when I say ours, I mean the original language we agreed to, or the new language, which I think has some promise, depending on how we do the strikes on the list, there needs to be a commitment from management that opportunities are granted for people to take the test. And that's the problem right now, is currently we have a firefighter who's not been provided with opportunity. She will not be able to promote unless she figures out a way to do it. I think she's in the process of doing it, but she's doing it in a way that, in my opinion, violates federal law. She's being forced to do it on her own time. I think there's ways to do it. There are ways to do it that are very clean. The other thing about this process is it's designed the notion that you'll be working with your crew to get the training. It's not like an academy class, you go to the academy. The whole process is designed around the notion that you're gonna be on a crew and the lieutenant's gonna be supervising other people working on you, so their experience is very different if you can get them in that environment. We've only had one problem with this in 12 years, but the problem happens to be current, and it could affect somebody's next promotion. And so we just want to reaffirm that there's this commitment, that they will have the opportunity to do it. I haven't asked the person to be willing to testify, not testify, but talk about it. I don't like the word testify. But you know, I think any reasonable person, after listening to her, would realize she has not had the opportunity. That's a problem. So, I actually like some of the ideas you have on that section, but we need to have that commitment. The use of civilians article, we've increased, by my calculations, civilians since 2017 by about 35%. It's 34 and some change. And given this specific increase, it's probably a good time to review civilian structures and supervision and stuff like that. And you know, just know, I mean, we were kind of ready to let this go forward with very little changes. But when you all said you wanted, you wanted to propose some changes to hiring and promotions, we also really need to get into the clarity of things. We started diving into this a little bit more. And so just as again, this is the base law we're negotiating off of. It's a very staunch set of conditions in almost everything in the fire department, including air pack maintenance, training, safety, prevention, needs to be a sworn uniform. Communications, photography, administration, which we have many civilian administrators, but the statute contemplates that being a firefighter. And we certainly have the talent to do it. We have attorneys, we have PhDs in our ranks now. We have professionals that work for Fortune 500 companies that come to the fire department. We certainly have the capacity to fill these positions with uniforms if we needed to. And then they talk about what it doesn't apply to. And it's a very limited group of people that the statute doesn't apply to. So I'm not saying we go back, but I'm saying that's where we're negotiating from, right? And we're trying to reach a deal that adds value on both sides of the table. And so we added to section 1, while maintaining an effective supervisory structure. You'll see it when I send over exactly what that means. But that's kind of the preamble section. Section 2, we struck the proposed edits, but only because we're waiting on more information from you all on how those civilian positions will be used. So that we're leaving that open as a possibility of discussion, but we struck it now as we sent it over. So just know that. On section 4, before changes can be proposed to section, we respectfully request a little more information. So if we could get the organizational chart for civilians within AFD. And what we're really particularly interested in, it seems like civilians within AFD sections that have uniforms over there are not supervising those employees, and that they actually report to other civilians outside of that section. So we're wanting some information on how that operates exactly. In section 5, we gave a, if I remember right, it was done in 2009. I think we gave without any concession from the city side. We really wanted to help in the recruiting aspects. But my understanding is those recruiters now being used in other sections sometimes. If I'm wrong, but I'm understanding they go to the community outreach and some other things, and there's not permissions to do that under the contract. So we're curious how those are used during non-recruiting cycles, or whatever you want to call it. The public information officer, we're trying to respect the current person in the position, but we believe that it'd be best suited by a firefighter in the future. Again, we certainly have the capabilities in our ranks to do that now. We're not saying that it wouldn't be civilians and that it'd be supervised by the PIO, but we think that would be, I think that actually could be a better way of doing it. At least we believe that. Wildfire management, we just really need more information on the TIPMIS deployments and how they're being used now. And so civilians go on TIPMIS deployments sometimes. They're supposed to go as a fill-in for firefighters that when there's an opening on a particular deployment. And we just want to make sure, you know, wildfire is so important to the association and to management, that there is what the commitment is on the management side, on making sure we put as many teams out there as possible so our folks can get that extra experience making these deployments. I think Austin normally sends 2 teams, I think Dallas sends 5, I think San Antonio sends 5. So you can see if you sent more, I had to commit to a higher number of teams, you certainly could get more people rotated through. And the notion of it was always to get a lot of people rotated through. Literally everybody in the department is capable. I think the Wildland Division put on some reasonable criteria for selection, which I think is actually I support. You want to make sure the person is physically fit, the person understands what the conditions will be, because they're pretty rough conditions. And so they go through this interview process, I think that's fine, but how can we, I guess the thing is, civilians going through deployments, civilians working within our jurisdiction under a firefighter in a TIFMAS deployment, even within the Austin jurisdiction. We're much more open to those ideas. We could understand better what the commitment is to AFD to expand the program so we get more firefighters through that training.
Let me comment briefly.
Sure.
Going back to the civilian piece in general, your reference to the statutory language. And not to be contentious at all, but I would like you to think about a little bit different perspective. As we look at this, I think we should look at the evolution not from a statute that was written, for the most part, 30 or 40 years ago. Originally written in 1977, amended down through the years, you know, legislative session after session and so forth. With the list that you showed us a little while ago, most of which written by Mike Higgins and Louis A. Baird. That really doesn't look like any other fire department in the state of Texas. It's a really old law. And so it is still in the statute, okay? Conceded. At the same time, I think we should look at where we were when we made this last agreement, or even the one before that. And the evolution should really be evaluated in terms of where we've gone, whether or not our movement from there has been legitimate.
I don't disagree with that.
And so
Yeah,
that's my sole comment on that.
Yeah, it's just that it seems to us like on hiring and promotions, we were there too. And on like negotiation, where I thought we probably didn't reach agreement you just wanted, probably not what we wanted, we reached an agreement. And we respected that agreement when we put those articles forward with no changes or very little changes. And I don't disagree with you. I think there should be a progression.
We understand stacking the scales that way very much, and we're sorting this out.
And we're not, I think we're very open to, I think what you're suggesting, but, you know, there were some reasons why they did it that were good reasons, you know, and I agree with those reasons still. You know, I think having long tenured people that are free of political influence is a good way to run public safety, you know. But I think for the most part, the changes we've made have worked very well. But if we're going to look at everything new and clarity and stuff, and that's kind of the exercise we're doing here. We could certainly go back the other way too. Training, we really need a little more information on how you use civilians. And right now we are not open. And now maybe you can provide us information that would make us think differently. But right now we're not open to civilians instructing cadets on EMT and COGs. Now, maybe you have a more limited idea or version that we're contemplating, and so we're still open to that conversation. But I'm talking to some of the EMT instructors that are uniformed. They do a really good job. They volunteer in those particular areas. It seems like it would be a loss to the program from our perspective. Again, if you have a more limited way of looking at it, we're certainly open to talking about that. And then under the intent, firefighters will supervise civilian employees in their assigned sections. Civilian employees who occasionally perform work within a section but are not assigned to the section supervised by a firefighter will be supervised by the fire within the section while they're working. for the work they are performing within that section. As we've had a lot more civilians added, we're bumping into a couple of issues. I think there's a lot of value in adding civilians. I think there's definitely a positive. Sometimes you have changes, there's paradoxical things going on. There's positives and negatives. So we want to talk about this. You know, we're not, this isn't our die on the hill sort of thing, but I think these are, these would be good discussions for us to have. And that's it. We can send those over to you in short order.
Very good. Very good. You want to go do this next, right?
Yeah, we'll figure out how to make it for you.
Were you all gonna go over your proposals?
We're gonna go over Article 18.
Okay.
Investigation and disciplinary actions. We have a proposal for today. Here earlier, 6/13/22. The first changes start with section 5. We recognize, first of all, we are not interested in the limitation on investigators requiring that investigators be from the AFD. And just to be straightforward about this, we don't think that the statute or the contract have limitations on who does an investigation of firefighter conduct or misconduct. We don't have a problem, although we tweak the language here a little bit, those people have to be trained on the subject of harassment. We recognize that there are some aspects of forms of harassment in the workplace, whether they are defined by state or federal law, such as Title VII and Chapter 21 of the Texas Labor Code, that those are different than, you know, an investigation of violation of department rules, you know, or a drug testing scenario, or whatever. And so it's in our mutual interest to make sure that people know what they're doing and they're trained to do it correctly. So we're on the same page about that. But we required to attend training was problematic for us because it seemed ambiguous in the context of we didn't want an argument that somebody that had previously been trained has to now be trained again before they can do an investigation of the department. But I think that one is fairly straightforward, common sense interpretation. Somebody's going to have a credential in terms of training on forms of harassment in order to be designated to perform that function.
And just so you know, we're not trying to like say people need to be trained to file grievance. We just want to make sure people understand that in harassment investigation, target harassment, you should treat it a little different when you have a little bit of training on it.
I think we're in the same page.
It's not toward respect and things, and that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for any more than that.
Very good. And I'm hoping that you're going to be pleased with this next development. We took a serious look at this business about polygraph examinations, going back long history in the city of Austin, how this works, the practical realities of doing it in arbitration and so forth. And we have decided to just delete the entire thing. And we will do our investigation, we'll come up with the facts, we'll make decisions based on the facts and the available evidence and testimony and so forth, and we're just not going to do polygraphs. And I think that they have not been commonly done in the past. You know, I think that, frankly, I got to tell you, I'm proud of the Austin team that they're willing to say, you know, do we really need this at all? And we decided that we don't.
So, you know, I didn't expect that, but quick question. So, like, first in Section A, it kind of contemplates a firefighter maybe being exonerated. You know, like they know they didn't do it, but whatever the circumstantial, they're willing to go do a polygraph to clear their name. but we're kind of striking that too. Is that saying they wouldn't be able to do that, or we just don't require?
I think we would just rather get rid of it, you know. My personal experience is in arbitrating these things on the police and fire side, that most of the arguments I've seen from representatives on the labor side have been arguing about the lack of validity for the process and so forth and so on. I think it is relatively rare first of all, this fire department has not used polygraph examinations much, if any, in the relevant recent past. I don't think that there have been instances where firefighters have come in and proposed to use that as a decision.
They were there before my time.
That's our proposal. We'd like you to think about it. We think that the considerations that we looked at are probably equally applicable to your side, but I understand it's kind of a new concept that we just get rid of it and go with what the facts are.
Okay. We'll take a look at it.
Right? We have this chain of command meeting, participation or responsibility. Let me see that footnote here.
That's just what
That's what?
I'll accept it.
That's all it says?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's y'all's language and we accept that proposal. And be consistent with our usual perspective that we're in favor of training because that makes the organization work better.
Yeah, I think we said we're not looking at anything too arduous. It could be a PowerPoint slide or something. Just so they have some idea. We are generally opposed to making a distinction other than the substance of what harassment is by definition. Under the applicable law that I've referred to, provisions in department policy and so forth. Investigative techniques and the investigative process, we don't think that there are good reasons for these kinds of additional mother may I's or checkoffs or whatever to be in the process. We really don't want requirements to look at particular specific evidence. We think that's a bad idea from an investigative standpoint. And on the other hand, it's already the case that the individual that's charged with a disciplinary violation involving harassment currently has the right to have representation in that process in the chain of command meeting, and have no reason that that's not going to be continued in the future. I think that that's a practice. I'd like you to reflect on that. Let's continue that discussion about what it's already covered. And what the department wants to do is to continue to have the prerogative for to define those investigative steps by policy and to modify them as things change over time. So think about that. I'm hoping that with the other agreements that are related to what your concerns were here, that we can get this taken care of. So I'm looking at your footnote. It says rejects insertion language, acknowledges current practices. I think that is our current practice.
No, it is.
Okay, I thought it was. It just hasn't been used very much because we don't have these things come up very often. That's why we thought there's a value to having the contract. So, the PSO can go through, oh yeah, I gotta do this, I gotta do this.
Because what we don't want to get distracted by, frankly, we think the policy works really well. If we say a person of their choosing, then we have to start talking about, okay, well, what about the limitations that it can't be somebody that actually was involved in the investigation? It can't be somebody that, is their direct supervisor. I mean, a number of other places that I have bargained as we have dealt with, who is the representative that can come? There are people that can't come because they have no business being in the investigation because they're a potential witness or all these other things.
And I can see that
We
perspective.
can deal with that by
Yeah.
policy, it's already happening, we don't think it's a problem. This kind of fits into the old Texas motto of don't fix it if it ain't broke, and we don't think it's broke.
So the current practice is that they can have somebody there to talk about perspective, a particular demographic. But there's kind of two concepts. So the first one is allowing to watch the video.
And that's requiring a particular piece of evidence to have primacy in the investigation, we don't want that.
Okay, so the reason we had that, though, just so you understand, is the target of the investigation gets to personally address the chain of command. And we asked for that the target could, and I believe this is practice too, unless I'm wrong. I mean, maybe the chief said no to this one, I thought he suggested this one.
I'll find out.
Yeah, but,
So I know. Right now, and it kind of going along with what Lynn was saying, it limits it to 60 minutes. Okay, so if it's a 4-hour interview, 60 minutes can be, so little things like that, if management feels the need to tweak those sorts of things, we don't want the specific policy in the contract because we think we are actually doing what you're saying, voluntarily by policy, and that it's working, and that there are reasonable limitations on it now so that it's not, they don't have to sit there and watch a 4-hour interview, but up to 60 minutes. But, there may be necessary tweaks as we move forward that can be done by policy, and putting it in the contract just isn't beneficial.
and to that point, there were necessary tweaks made, like I think it was 30 minutes at one time, those made an hour, so, there were tweaks made. So it sounds like that management's not intending to change these practices, they just want the ability to modify them if necessary.
That's correct.
That's why you would want
To adjust,
contract.
to adjust as circumstances change, because they seem like they inevitably do.
Okay, so we're agreeable to these practices, we just don't want to
Correct.
put them in the contract, because we want to modify them possibly when conditions indicate they need to be modified.
And that's why we use the
Exactly.
footnote that way, because to make this argument, we have to own up to the fact that the current practice is what the current practice is, and we recognize that that's a part of this deal if we take the language without your
Right.
permission.
And we appreciate the chief making that the current practice, we just thought it would be a good place to put it in the contract. I see what you're saying, we'll discuss with those.
It is the risk of mother may I arguments in discipline that keep us from wanting to set it in that kind of stuff.
Right, well, we're trying to add it because we thought it added value to the procedure. We weren't trying to tie the chief's hands, so.
But your fine lawyers might take a different position in a disciplinary case.
Yeah, and biology will make us all leave the table someday, right, so.
Sooner or
Who
later.
knows?
All right, so now we understand why we had opposed that language. We're opposed to the introduction of the city auditor's office into any of those investigations. It's actually, their scope of authority and so forth is defined by other sources, including the city charter, I believe. And this chief of the department is not a subject of the contract. We think it's actually outside the legitimate scope of bargaining because he's not a member of the association and he's a subordinate of the city manager, and the city manager has those prerogatives that are defined by state law and the city charter. So we just think that that topic is a total stranger to our labor negotiations. On the next section that we get down there, you proposed some language that we felt like was overbroad. We agree that periodic updates is legitimate and fair, and that this fits into the category of the perception of fairness is every bit as important as actual fairness in these things. Anybody that is under investigation obviously is going to be thinking about it, worrying about it, and wants to know what's going on. And so we've tried to accommodate that in this language, and not any preclusion from somebody requesting information, but of course not having a right to control the if, where, when, and how kind of a response, because as we all know, when something is pending, then I can give you a response because we're waiting on something and we don't know the answer. And the response is gonna depend on that question. Maybe we've written a letter to a potential witness and we haven't gotten a response and we're waiting. And we had a 10-day cycle before we can find out whether or not they're gonna get in touch with us. And if so, what's option number 2? Because in the investigation, we can't subpoena that witness. Is there another way to get that witness in here and so forth?
So I think that makes sense. It's kind of along the same lines as the article that we talked about before.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that it sounds like we want to ensure the practice of periodic updates,
Yes.
make sure people respect the process. But we don't want to necessarily write it down in a hard way that
That's
could make us need to violate it, depending on the circumstance. Is that pretty close?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right.
This was just your original typo, we wanted to delete it on your behalf.
Yeah, I think I might have.
So I just kinda made a
Take it
footnote
out of
there.
there and put it in the other section.
You are welcome to, I just didn't feel, you indicated that verbally that was just
Yeah, and, you
you
know,
had it in a different place, but.
just, I won't talk much about this one, but I'll talk a little bit about it. I didn't expect that anyone would want to accept this. We do think it's an issue that we've had, and we just have to figure out other avenues to deal with that issue. I know the Public Safety Commission's taken it up before. I imagine they'll want to take it up again, but, you know, I gotta represent my members. There's been some issues brought up, so we gotta do something with it. But in terms of the agreement, I don't think we need to be held up on this thing.
Okay. So on the disciplinary matrix, we don't think it's realistic for us to get this done and put it in the contract. I know that's your objective, or at least it has been, as we understand it. We're confident that we can go forward, we can put this together, we can take the necessary time, because the short 60-day cycle we now have is different than our history. We have a lot of other important things to deal with. And so we're gonna ask you to let us move this work this out after the contract is in place.
Is this the same language you proposed before?
I don't think it changed at all, right?
No, we didn't.
And so that's really the hang up here is just your preference to get it done and put it in the contract. And we don't think that's realistic. We think we need to go forward and get everything else out of the way, and that this is not really gonna be problematic to do after we have the rest of this labor agreement in place.
And of course, one of the challenges for us on this is within the contract, it's an agreement, you know, between two parties. And the way this is written, it seems like there's a lot of process, but in the end, the chief can unilaterally do what he wants. And that's the concern we were trying to get away from by doing it at the table. So
I've never seen a disciplinary matrix to where the chief didn't have discretion to depart from the matrix, subject to an arbitrator's evaluation of whether or not that was justified.
I would think that it's like all the other things, you can't be locked down too tight.
That's right.
So,
Everyone I've ever seen written in the contract still had that same perspective.
I guess I'm talking about the parameters themselves for particular disciplines. This is where the chief can, this process, the chief could literally do it unilaterally, and then at the table, I guess the reason I'm more comfortable with that, we're talking about potentially a change in working conditions, and we would have to agree to it then. And I don't think we'd be that far off if we were to work it out the table, because I think we both essentially want the same things. We want proper discipline for whatever infraction people can be, if somebody did the crime, then there'd be a proper punishment. I think it adds certainty. We were hoping we could do it at the table for that reason. We'll take a look at it. That's our concern.
I understand.
And I probably doesn't surprise you that our concern.
No, it doesn't at all. And I think that what I would hope that y'all can consider is let this process go forward. This process, I think you will agree, will be an improvement in the condition of your members, even if there was some piece of that matrix puzzle that you didn't agree with. So it's better than the scenario now to where those disciplinary choices are just subject to the chief's determination, and then we go to an arbitrator in a vacuum without that framework. And then next time we're at the bargaining table, you'll know whether or not it needs to be bargained in at all.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's gonna be a holdup and it's gonna take time that frankly, we don't really have in the schedule that we've looked at.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if y'all are adamant that you don't want to do it at the table, there's nothing we can do to make that happen at the table. Right? Both sides have to be agreeable. I still think it could be done a lot quicker than most people believe, or maybe some people believe, because I believe the chief's already got his draft. I think it could be done rather quickly. We'll take a look at what you wrote. Our preference would still be try to do it at the table. But we'll take a look at this and see what we can do with it.
Thank you very much.
Has there been any progress on getting us a copy of that draft? I know the chief's shown it at a couple of chiefs meetings. He's got something that's obviously not final.
I'll
Got
get
an example.
I'll get informed. I'll get informed about that and see what we can bring you back with
Thank
an
you.
answer, because I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we had some baseline, it might be a little more, a little easier to accept perhaps, That's it?
I believe so. And we will go back and work on our other article that we had on the list. Which one is that one?
Okay, 7. Yeah, we may or may not have gotten information.
Right.
By this time.
We're gonna go see if we have the information on 7 on dues.
Technical difficulties.
It doesn't have a battery. Battery can't be ready to die, because we don't have a battery on this thing. The battery pack is on 4 section.
Frank, my
Yeah. It must be the
Maybe it's
battery on
actual-
something
Maybe it's the
different.
actual laptop battery.
Yeah, that's what it probably is. Not my laptop, maybe it's yours. Or maybe it's something else. This,
All right.
Anyway, sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Thank you.
We're good.
I'll get you the, I'll send you by the way.